Tage, let's talk about a really exciting matchup between the Bills and the Ravens. We're going to start with the Bills offense versus the Ravens defense, where, if you want to tell me that the Bills are the best team in the league, I'm not going to argue with you at all. And then if you want to tell me that Josh Allen is the best quarterback in the league, also not going to argue with you at all there. He's certainly playing like it. It is crazy to see just how he's operating everything within the offense. It feels like he has just more control over things. I think that it is cool to see that their pass game is kind of morphed like a little bit. Like we think about the interception that he threw against the Eagles last year where, Gabe Davis is kind of running an option route. It feels like there's like less of those option routes where now some of the pass concepts, not that they're necessarily easier, but I think it can kind of lower the variance just a little bit from the negative end where you can still obviously access the top end of Josh Allen's distribution on any sort of throw. So I do think it's, what Joe Brady's done is it seems really good. And they're a team that really also leans into the make the case for base where they're going to get their 6 offensive linemen on the field. The numbers aren't going to tell you that they're a great running team, and they don't have to be, because if they can force you into base, they can just pass off of it. And Josh Allen doesn't need that many receivers on the field to really be able to just throw bullets and throw touchdowns over and over. We certainly saw that on Monday night against the Jaguars. Tage, what are we thinking here for the Bills offense?
I love all the Josh Allen praise. I'm so glad that he's getting what is very deserved for how he's playing right now, but also just what he's done these past couple seasons. And we've talked about this so much on this show, but the blueprint for highly successful offenses right now in this current era of NFL football is low sack rate, low average at the target, and high yards after catch. And that's exactly what the Bills are hitting on, where they currently have the lowest sack rate in the league. Josh Allen does such a good job of avoiding sacks, but also the offensive line has played pretty well, probably better than what people expected coming into the season. They have the 23rd highest average at the target, so they're keeping things shorter. You think about all the routes to Khalil Shakir that have been doing so well for them this season. Like those are all usually shorter of the sticks and relying on the yards after catch. And they rank second in yards after catch, which is very unusual for a Bills offense, especially with the previous version that was a lot of deeper passes to Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. And now they've really just adjusted their offense to fit this other mold. And so they've just been really good at all three of those things. And it's a big reason why they rank first in EPA per play and first in success rate so far.
I think whenever you see a team shifting their offensive identity still centered around the same player, I just love to see that, because you're finding ways to evolve in that the defense is going to treat you differently because you have Josh Allen. But can you still find ways to maybe not manufacture explosive plays, but like against the Jaguars, they had just had an awesome plan for man coverage, using different motions, finding different ways to just have guys that ended up wide open because they knew they were going to get man coverage. There's certainly a lot of praise is deserved for that offense. And I don't know, like, is Josh Allen kind of unlucky that he has to play in the same era as Patrick Mahomes? Like, he is an all-time talent and a crazy, crazy outlier story, kind of based on what he was in junior college, what he was in college, and then even early on in his pro career. So it's just always fun. And certainly the Bills are like, they kill September. They really know how to play well in September. I hope that they're able to continue that as the season goes along. Let's flip over thinking about the Ravens defense. Of course, they lose Mike McDonald, but they're still that same sort of kind of modern defense. They do play, I think, a little bit more man coverage. They have a bunch of dime looks where you get 6 defensive backs on the field. It feels like they've generated maybe a little bit less pressure. It feels like their blitz percentage is maybe a little bit down. They do have 10 sacks, so I think they're finishing some of those plays, which that can kind of help you. I do think that they are like good enough in the run game to be able to make things kind of an issue, but they also haven't been run on a ton, just like a weird kind of stat. I think they're last in the league in opponent run percentage. They've also just had like some weird late game losses where the Chiefs game is really, really tight. The Raiders kind of, I'm not even sure if I call it a collapse, but just a weird situation where they end up losing in that one. What are some stats for this Ravens defense, Tage?
Yeah, I want to touch on your point about how they haven't been run on a ton. And they do rank 31st in pass rate over expected against. Only the Patriots have had more passes seen just because of the way that their defense is set up. And they have created this pass funnel. So it makes a lot of sense why offenses are doing it. They rank 4th in EPA per rush allowed, but 27th in EPA per pass allowed. And so teams are going to continue to pass on them a lot. which makes sense because they haven't been great at tackling. That was like a strong emphasis of their defense these past couple seasons. It feels like it's always a staple in Baltimore to be a physical tackling team, but they've allowed the 23rd most yards after catch so far this year. They rank 16th in sack rate, like you mentioned, so that's dropped down a little bit as well. And they've given up 5.7 explosives per game, which is below average. And they've seen a tough schedule so far. So, want to discount that a little bit, but this obviously isn't the defense that it is last year, but there is still some optimism, just based on how good their run defense is. And then like, if they can clean up some of the explosives that they've given up, because they are around league average in terms of success rate allowed, but they've just given up a lot of explosives, which has made their EPA numbers look worse.
All right, Tage, let's start to think about the best matchup for the Bills offense against the Ravens defense. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I think for the best matchup for the Bills offense in this game is the intermediate passing from Josh Allen to these pass catchers that usually do a lot of work in that area of the field. This season so far, he ranks first in EPA per pass in that range, the 5 to 15 air yard range. He's been especially good when throwing to the middle of the field in that range on a very low sample. And the Ravens rank 23rd in success rate allowed against passes that go 5 to 15 air yards. And so when you look at the target distribution for that area of the field, Khalil Shakir has had 5 targets with a 100% success rate. So all of it, 5 of his targets have been successful, which makes both of us very, very happy. Dalton Kincaid has also had 4 targets in that area with a 50% success rate. And then you just have a collection of all the pass catches that they have. Mac Hollins, MVS, Curtis Samuel, Dawson Knox, James Cook, like they can all do work in that area. Keon Coleman is still working his way into the offense, but he's someone who did well in that area of the field, especially in the deeper part of it at Florida State and at Michigan State. So they just have so many pass catching options. And I think that that's going to be an area that they like to get both Shakir and Kincaid going in this game early.
I'm excited to see how they do that against all the zone coverage that the Ravens are going to play, because against Jacksonville, the Bills have guys running wide open because they know how to get their man beaters. And I do think Allen has improved in how he deals with zone defenses, even thinking back to their game against the Cardinals, just being mature in how you do it. And like Josh Allen always, I feel like kind of fighting himself in that, like, should I squeeze this throw into this window that might not exist, that might end up in an interception? I think he's been just better at that through the start of the season. So I'm interested to see how much that's able to continue, and then what kind of zone beaters that that offense has dialed up. What do we think about the opposite side? Like, is there kind of any example? I guess we talked about how good the Ravens' run defense has kind of been so far. Like, can you just induce the Bills into running the ball over and over, I guess?
That is what you kind of have to do in this game, is to just put the ball out, or get the ball out of Josh Allen's hands as much as possible. Ravens run defense has been really good this year, and the Bills rush offense ranks 11th in EPA per rush right now. And so if you can kind of force them to run the ball and to really just make sure that you're being gap sound when they do that, that will be advantageous for the Ravens defense in this game. But because of how the Ravens defense is set up, where teams are just passing on them at a very high rate, we'll see if Joe Brady kind of falls into that bucket, or if the Ravens are able to game plan well enough to get him to run the ball.
All right, let's think about some of just matchups that are fun, that I think that when we talk about the game for our weekend review, we'll be looking at a little bit closer. What do you have for a fun matchup for the Bills offense against the Ravens defense?
I think a fun matchup in this game will be Khalil Shakir against Roquan Smith. So when Shakir is working out of the slot, and when Roquan Smith gets matched up against him, Roquan Smith hasn't had a great year in terms of just yards allowed so far, but he's still obviously a very good linebacker. And I think Shakir is starting to not become underrated anymore, but still underrated relative to what people think about him. And so it'll be really fun when they get matched up in this game.
Yeah, I love it. We're going to have to do some, like, how long can we call a player underrated for? How long can we kind of call them emerging? We'll have to do a little bit of a look at that. I'm really excited for just Deion Dawkins versus the edge rushers, where I think Dawkins is playing really, really well. I think he looks comfortable in his technique, and it's just like unfair that, hey, we're going to give Josh Allen like a really good offensive line here. That's going to be a fun one to watch for a team that obviously wants to generate pressure in some kind of unique ways and kind of in the aggregate create that pass rush. What do you think just a fun matchup on the opposite side here is for the Ravens defense against the Bills offense?
Yeah, when the Ravens are in defense, they can get pressure and sacks with both Kyle Van Noy and Odafe Owe. And Josh Allen is currently the best quarterback in the NFL at avoiding sacks. And so it'll be really fun to see when either of those guys gets into the backfield, Josh Allen sack avoidance, how he'll bail out of the pocket, start going backwards because he has the arm and the legs to get away with all of that, and like how these guys kind of maintain their pass rushing lanes, but also are able to chase him down. That's always one of the most fun parts to watch of Bills games.
Yeah, I want to see how Kyle Hamilton does just being forced into the box when the Bills put a six offensive lineman, and they do make the case for base, and kind of maybe the Ravens are not going to play a bunch of base, but force, Hamilton has to be that kind of essentially a third linebacker playing in the slot from that nickel look. So I think that to me is something I'm going to track, and just something that's fun to see how the Bills try and manipulate the Ravens defense a little bit. Tay, let's leave the people with some keys to win for the Bills offense against the Ravens defense. What do you got?
Yeah, key to win for the Bills offense is just attacking that intermediate area of the field. Like I was talking about, 5 to 15 air yards, especially if it's the middle of the field, just because of how good they've been in that area so far this season. And then just generating explosives through the pass game a couple times in this game will be huge. It'll most likely be like a 10 air yard pass that has 10, 15 yards after catch. And so just being able to do that a couple times to keep getting the Ravens into situations where they're allowing explosives will be big. But the overarching point is just like, if you're Joe Brady, do not become too run happy in this game. It's probably what the Ravens want you to do. And you might want to do it because you've been more run heavy than your predecessor in Ken Dorsey, but just like keep putting the ball in Josh Allen's hands, because usually good things happen when the ball is in his hands.
Yeah, I feel like part of the keys for the Ravens defense here is, can you get bad Josh Allen in some sort of way? Can you either create that by the way that you're kind of clogging up some of the pass windows? Can you speed him up with pressure in some sort of way? But like when you blitz him, he can extend the play and play so well. I'm also curious, just can the defense be sound when Allen is not necessarily scrambling, but just extending that play where now you have them in that scramble drill, and then zone coverage is harder, just more time down. The clock is ticking, but guys are getting open kind of back and forth. So that I think will just be a great matchup to look for. Tej, let's take it to our final look here for the Ravens offense versus the Bills defense. The Ravens offense is one that is interesting in a few different ways. Of course, Todd Monken, he gets his second year. They bring in Derrick Henry. Against the Cowboys, it was certainly, a lean on Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson in the run game, where it felt like the Cowboys did not do a great job on some of these just zone read plays where you have like a defensive end crashing and a linebacker kind of flowing over the top, where it was just a real struggle for the Cowboys. I do think that they would love to have a more consistent kind of winner outside, where, Tej, how many years are we going to talk about the Ravens kind of having that situation? They're going to lean into those gap scheme runs where that really does put a lot of pressure on a defense that wants to play a lot of nickel like the Bills defense does. They're going to be happy to run into some of those stacked boxes. And again, they just like play weird games. Like the Ravens just find ways to make the game really, really weird. They've relied on Mark Andrews certainly a lot less. And in week one, it was like, how sustainable is this going to be where you're relying on Lamar Jackson to really create plays over and over off script? So I think that's something that to monitor for the Bills defense. What are you thinking from a stats perspective here?
Yeah, the Ravens offense is a little bit hard to evaluate right now just because of like how much of an outlier it is to play the Cowboys defense, with not only how much teams run the ball on them, but just like how efficiently they do so. But they do rank 5th in EPA per play on the season so far. Like I mentioned, this is probably a product of just playing the Cowboys defense last week, but they have a higher EPA per rush than EPA per pass. But what's really impressive about the Ravens offense right now is they rank 2nd in sack rate on offense. So like they've done a really good job of avoiding sacks, even despite their offensive line going through a bit of a transition period right now where they're replacing a couple of them. And so if they can continue to do that well, that gives their pass offense a certain floor. And then the ceiling can really be raised by hitting on some deeper downfield passes. They've been much better passing under 15 air yards than over 15 air yards. There's been some miscommunications or misthrows by Lamar or maybe Rashad Bateman not getting under certain passes. But as long as both him and players like Isaiah Likely or Nelson Aguilar continue to separate downfield, while Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers can work more underneath. Like there is a path for this pass offense to be good. They just need to get into some of those concepts better than what they've been doing these first couple of weeks of the season.
And certainly for the Ravens, the offensive line is an issue. It was less of an issue against the Cowboys because, yeah, they had like a good showing kind of on the ground over and over. But the Bills are going to be able to rush the passer here. And so I do wonder what comes out of that. Let's keep talking a little bit more about that Bills defense. Or when I think of Sean McDermott, it's not necessarily like a Sean McDermott coaching tree or a Sean McDermott kind of scheme, but they just do, or he does a really, really good job with the Bills defense where they've been injured so much and to still get really not just competent play, but above competent play, certainly from defensive backs over and over. That is really, really awesome. They're going to play a lot of cover two. They're going to mix in that, cover six where you're playing cover four one way, cover two the other way. They're going to season it just a little bit with kind of safety rotation to get to cover three. They've had really impressive play up front. I think a lot higher than what I expected, where when your pass rush is able to get to the quarterback, it makes your zone coverage so much better. Where we think about how the Bengals just could not do anything against Jaden Daniels. When you can't generate a pass rush, your zone coverage is really going to get unwinded pretty quickly. So again, the DBs, they just play well. Like it's not something fancy where we're drawing up something crazy on a whiteboard. It's just impressive and shows that the coaching, I think, is done at such a high level. What are you thinking here, Tej, for the Bills defense?
Yeah, they just need to find one defensive back a year that can really just be a standout performer because that that they're going to get injury of some type on the defense. And so that's Christian Benford this year for the defense, where he's only allowed 26 yards on 127 coverage snaps so far this season. Judah Fortgang posts a great graph every week about cornerback separation allowed and how well they do catch point and yards after catch. And he's top right on that graph. Shows up very good when you break down the individual components of cornerback play. And the Bills as a whole are just a good tackling team this year. They rank 7th in yards after catch allowed, which they've done a really good job of. And it's particularly impressive because they've seen an average depth of target there. So that's been good. And overall, just 7th in EPA per play. They've been 2nd against the pass, which again, byproduct of playing the Dolphins offense and getting a very bad Tua game and Skylar Thompson in the second half. But they've still just looked really good on defense overall. And going to the pass rush, like you have Gregory Rousseau, Von Miller, Ed Oliver, AJ Epinenza. Like there's so many pass rushes that can get to you in the backfield. The Von Miller resurgence was what this defensive line needed. And they've really gotten that in this game or in this season so far. And so in this game in particular, I can see them getting a lot of pressure because of that.
Yeah, thinking about just a matchup for the Ravens offense against the Bills defense, the Ravens are certainly going to look to run the ball a ton. They're going to want to get heavy. They're going to want to, they do want to establish Derrick Henry kind of over and over, if against a defense that, again, they're going to play maybe not light boxes, but light bodies where you have that nickel cornerback on the field, just 4 down linemen, just 2 linebackers. Henry can be in a positive situation there. But then I'm interested to see when Lamar gets into some of that game where he's keeping it on some of those options. Defenses that keep 2 high safeties back, sometimes they can deal with it a little bit better because now the safeties can rotate based on, where the read is, and you can add that extra player where the Ravens have the advantage a lot of time because, most teams don't have a quarterback that can actually run and can even those numbers and make it actually 11 on 11 football. The Bills can maybe deal with that a little bit better than other teams just based on how they use their safeties. What are you thinking here for a positive matchup for the Ravens offense against the Bills defense?
Yeah, when the Bills defense is in the 2 linebacker sets, where they have an extra defensive back on the field, I think that's the prime opportunity for the Ravens to really get Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews going in this game. And both of their usages have been weird so far this season. The Ravens dropped back 15 times last week, but Mark Andrews only ran a route on 4 of those 15 dropbacks. So that was a little strange, as he works his way back from not only the surgery that he had mid offseason. But you also wonder if the car crash he had over the summers is also affecting some of his recovery time there. But likely was someone who was so good in week one against the Chiefs and hasn't really done much since. And so definitely want to see more of him there as well. And Lamar has done a great job of passing in that intermediate area, 5 to 15 air yards, like we were talking about earlier with Josh Allen. He ranks fifth in EPA per pass in that area. And the Bills are about average at defending passes in that area of the field. And so that is where the Ravens offense should really focus in on when they drop back in this game.
Yeah, the Andrews likely thing, like I'm monitoring it. It's just like what is going on there? I'm not really sure. Yeah, it could be Andrews just not at 100% health. It could be that hey, you're just getting likely who is playing at a high level. I don't know. It's just something that we got to think more about, and we will look forward to in this game. I'm thinking about just a matchup that's positive for the Bills. Like the pass rush can just end this game. Like they can totally ruin the entire game plan for the Ravens if they're able to force them, into some of those pass situations and just win up front again against offensive line that has had issues kind of over and over. And I do wonder how the Bills treat that pass rush, but then what is your plan for Lamar Jackson, where the Chiefs did a good job of crashing that pocket and then you loop either a linebacker, maybe another defensive lineman to the outside. And the Bills have this in their bag. They've used it I think they used it against the Chiefs a few times where you literally have your defensive ends just go inside. Just you can spin it and move inside. You can rip inside, whatever, because you're encouraging the quarterback to go somewhere. But now you have a defender looping out there where when Lamar Jackson's in the pocket and you have a spy, sometimes a spy, you see this with Kyler Murray particularly, sometimes it doesn't matter because the quarterback can just outrun the spy. But if you're moving him to exactly where you want to move him to, that is a situation that can sometimes be a little bit more positive. Tage, overall for the Ravens offense versus Bills defense, another situation where it feels like we're going to learn just a ton of things. Like, can Lamar Jackson superhero you through this matchup? I think is one thing. The Bills defense, are they able to just overcome the injuries again? Whenever players come back healthy, if they do end up coming back healthy, and then really, can this Bills defensive line just fully win you a game?
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great point to bring up, and the Bills' defensive line has played very well this year. They rank 13th in sack rate among all defenses, but that's not really filtering out some of the garbage time that they've had in the second halves of two consecutive games now. But I think like I was worried about the Ravens' offensive line going into that Raiders matchup because of what they had in Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins. And the Bills might not have a player like that on their defensive line, but they just have four pass rushers that can all show up on any given day and get to the quarterback. And that's hard to prepare for when your offensive line has like multiple areas of uncertainty. So if the Bills are kind of doing some of the unique alignment stuff, like you were talking about, where they're putting three pass rushers on one side and then maybe one on the other to kind of get Lamar to drift to an area, where they want him to end up, I think that will be something that we could see from Sean McDermott and the Bills defense in this game, but also just having 4 or 5 pass rushers just constantly putting pressure in Lamar's face and forcing him to take some of the shorter throws so that they can't get into their deeper passing